Hello, history buffs, time travelers, and scholars. When it comes to Roman emperors, there are some wild stories, but Caligula takes the crown for the craziest. Historians have pretty much agreed that this guy was completely off his rocker. His reign was like a mix of bad decisions, bizarre stunts, and just plain weirdness that left everyone scratching their heads. If you thought your boss was strange, just wait until you hear what Caligula did during his time as emperor. Trust me, it's next level crazy. Caligula's bizarre actions. Some stories about him are so wild that people today wonder if they could be true, but there's no evidence against them. Caligula also wanted to be worshipped as a god. He built temples for himself, where people bowed down to statues of him made from gold. He even planned to replace Zeus's head in the famous statue at Olympia with his own. He demanded that flamingos and peacocks be sacrificed in his honor instead of just bulls. His obsession with being a god almost caused a rebellion. He ordered a monument of himself to be built in Jerusalem, and when the Jews refused to worship him properly, they nearly rioted. To punish the governor who tried to stop him, Caligula had his head cut off. Caligula also declared war on Neptune, the god of the sea, and ordered his soldiers to attack the English Channel. Some versions of the story say this was a failed military campaign, but it still showed his bizarre behavior, a reign of madness and excess. Caligula's reign as Roman emperor was filled with bizarre and excessive actions that shocked both the citizens of Rome and the wider world. His conduct often seemed to defy reason, with decisions and orders so outrageous that many questioned his sanity. Stories about his rule circulated through Roman society, and while some seem too strange to believe, there is no solid evidence that these tales were entirely false. What made Caligula's actions even more alarming was that he believed his behavior was justified. His decisions, no matter how strange, seemed to be rooted in a sense of divine right and power. One of the most famous and bizarre aspects of Caligula's rule was his treatment of his horse, Incitatus. He allegedly showered his horse with luxury, providing the animal with a multi-room home complete with servants. While it's often debated whether Caligula actually made his horse a consul, historical accounts do suggest that he treated Incitatus as if it were an esteemed noble. Before every meal, Caligula would invite his horse to join him at the dinner table, where they would share wine from golden goblets, raising a toast to the horse's health. It was said that Caligula even took extreme measures to ensure that his horse could enjoy some peace and quiet, ordering soldiers to silence the crowds during public events when Incitatus appeared to be disturbed by the noise. Caligula's behavior toward his horse was just one example of the emperor's tendency to elevate animals and objects to absurd levels of importance. Caligula's need for power and recognition did not stop at elevating animals. He sought to be worshipped as a god. He took extreme steps to establish his own cult and demanded the citizens of Rome revere him as a divine figure. To accomplish this, he built massive temples dedicated to his worship, filled with statues made of pure gold in his likeness. He also constructed a life-sized statue of himself in the famous Temple of Zeus at Olympia. His most infamous act, however, was his plan to replace the head of the statue of Zeus with his own. This was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and Caligula's desire to make it a symbol of his own divinity was a clear sign of his obsession with godlike power. His plan was so elaborate that he even gathered a group of priests and organized ceremonies to offer sacrifices in his honor, including animals like flamingos and peacocks, which were seen as more extravagant than traditional sacrifices. Caligula's actions didn't just upset the religious order, they also threatened the stability of the Roman Empire. In one instance, Caligula ordered a monument of himself to be built in Jerusalem, which angered the Jewish population. When the Jews refused to worship him as a god, he nearly ignited a full-scale rebellion. Tensions reached a boiling point, and it took the intervention of a Roman official, Petronius, to prevent an uprising. Caligula, however, did not tolerate disobedience. In a cruel act of punishment, he had Petronius executed, believing that the governor had acted against his orders. This was just one example of how Caligula used violence to maintain control, with mass executions becoming a regular part of his rule. One of Caligula's most famous and absurd actions was his supposed declaration of war against Neptune, the god of the sea. According to various historical accounts, Caligula ordered his soldiers to march to the shores of the English Channel and fight Neptune. The soldiers were instructed to stab the water with their swords as if they were in battle. Some historians believe this story may be exaggerated, but there is evidence that Caligula did send an army to the English Channel, and the action was widely seen as a display of his madness. His soldiers were not given treasure or land as a reward. Instead, they were promised seashells to fill their helmets with as a token for their victory. Caligula's reign also saw the creation of a monstrous floating pleasure palace, built for indulgence and excess. He spent lavishly to construct 2 enormous barges on Lake Nemi, decorated with jewels, gold cups, and statues. These pleasure barges were meant to be used for wild parties and orgies, as Caligula surrounded himself with luxury and decadence. The palaces had floors made of glass mosaics, and even the sails were crafted from purple silk. This extravagant construction marked a new level of indulgence in the Roman Empire, reflecting the emperor's desire for constant pleasure and excess at the cost of the state's well-being. Throughout his reign, Caligula continued to blur the lines between power and madness. His behavior became more erratic and unpredictable, as he increasingly saw himself as a divine being whose whims could not be questioned. The Roman Senate, the people, and even his closest advisors grew fearful of his actions. His rule, marked by cruelty, extravagance, and delusions of grandeur, would ultimately come to a violent end, with Caligula being assassinated by members of the Senate and his own guards. However, the legacy of his madness lived on, with his reign remembered as one of the most bizarre and tyrannical periods in Roman history. One of the most notorious aspects of his rule involved his sexual exploits and the use of his sisters in his orgies. Caligula was known for holding wild, debauched parties on his ships at Lake Nemi, where the most intimate and forbidden acts were said to occur, often in the presence of his sisters, whom he reportedly cherished in ways that were both familial and sexually indulgent. However, this wasn't the limit of his depravity. He often commanded his noblemen to bring their wives along for visits, only to inspect them, line them up, and select one to accompany him privately. Afterward, the husbands were subjected to graphic descriptions of their wives' behavior in Caligula's chambers, humiliated and forced to listen to the intimate details. This cruel and degrading behavior was a constant feature of his rule, showcasing his disregard for human dignity and his need to assert dominance in every possible way. In another extraordinary act of spite, Caligula sought to prove a fortune teller wrong by constructing a massive floating bridge across the Bay of Naples. The astrologer had predicted that Caligula would never become emperor, comparing his chance of success to that of riding a horse across the Gulf of Baie. In defiance of this prophecy, Caligula ordered the creation of a bridge spanning 5 kilometers, built out of ships lined up across the bay, with earth placed atop them to support the bridge. This feat of engineering was not only an enormous waste of resources, but also a testament to Caligula's excessive nature. When the bridge was completed, he rode across it on horseback to make his point, cementing his reputation for vindictive displays of power. Caligula's cruelty extended beyond personal indulgences. During the popular gladiatorial games, he made a macabre spectacle of the events, ordering executions of prisoners and sometimes even forcing random spectators into the arena to be torn apart by wild animals. When there were no criminals available to execute, he would direct his guards to select random audience members, casting them into the arena for the amusement of the crowd. This brutal display of power was not only a means of entertaining the people, but also an illustration of Caligula's obsession with demonstrating his control over life and death. One of the most chilling instances of Caligula's cruelty occurred when he ordered the execution of a handsome young man simply out of jealousy. Envious of the man's good looks and fine hair, Caligula had him executed. Afterward, the man's father, pleading for his son's life, only made matters worse, accelerating the execution. As a cruel twist, Caligula then invited the grieving father to share a meal with him, adding a layer of humiliation to the father's grief. This incident, along with many others, reflected Caligula's sadistic nature, as he often sought to make personal and public examples of those he considered beneath him. Caligula's dark and twisted acts, a glimpse into his madness. Shortly after the tragic death of a man's son, Caligula forced the grieving father to drink a toast to the emperor's health, eat at his table, and accept gifts from him, all while staring at the man who had just executed his son. The father had no choice but to comply. The famous Roman philosopher Seneca recorded that the father was made to sit and smile throughout this ordeal, knowing that if he showed any sorrow, it would mean the death of his other sons. Caligula's cruelty knew no bounds, and his twisted sense of humor made the situation even worse. Caligula's reign as emperor of Rome is often remembered for his bizarre and horrific actions. One of the most chilling aspects of his rule was his ability to manipulate those around him to further assert his power. His acts were often theatrical and done in a way that was meant to provoke shock and fear. It is difficult to say whether he was simply playing games with his court, using his power to control and terrify, or if he truly suffered from an unstable mind. Regardless of the reasons behind his actions, there is no denying the lasting impact he left on history. It is often debated whether Caligula was putting on a show or genuinely suffering from severe mental illness. Many historians believe that his behavior went beyond cruelty and was a result of his deteriorating mind. Caligula reportedly struggled with intense delusions and insomnia, often sleeping less than 3 hours at a time due to vivid hallucinations. At one point, he claimed that water was speaking to him, keeping him awake all night. There were also rumors that he had conversations with the Roman god Jupiter, but these were not religious discussions. Instead, he would argue with the god in a way that no one else could understand. These bizarre claims further fuel the idea that Caligula's insanity was a key factor in his reign. Seneca recounted an incident where Caligula, furious over a thunderstorm interrupting a ballet performance, stormed outside and threatened to beat Jupiter to death. He was enraged at the gods for ruining his entertainment, showing his unstable mind and fragile temper. This bizarre interaction with the divine highlights how far Caligula's mind had deteriorated, as he could no longer distinguish between reality and his own hallucinations. Beyond his delusions, Caligula's cruelty was legendary. He had a complete disregard for human life, even for those closest to him. There are numerous accounts of him ordering executions on a whim, or engaging in acts of extreme violence for his own amusement. His sense of humor, if it could even be called that, was twisted and morbid. It was said that he forced criminals to perform in gladiator games, only to be executed for the entertainment of the audience. In some cases, he even threw innocent people into the arena to be devoured by wild animals, demonstrating how far he was willing to go for a bit of amusement. If you found Caligula's story fascinating, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more intriguing history content. We're always diving into the most shocking, bizarre, and unforgettable moments from history. Let us know in the comments which historical figures or events you'd like us to explore next. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.